Thank you. Thank you and welcome. The title of this talk is How to Getting Rid of Your Fear of Bugs, and I think it might be a little bit misleading. So let me explain first. This is not about software bugs. It's about actual bugs. So if you're here thinking to get a talk about software bugs, you might be in the wrong room. You can still stay. I still think it's an entertaining talk, or at least I liked it a lot. So Abraham introduced me. Thank you for that. We are old colleagues, so I'm happy that it was a good introduction and not some jokey introduction. I'm a software architect here in Amsterdam at Trifork. And in this talk, I would like to discuss a project we did for the University of Leiden. And we actually helped them build an application to help anxiety treatment in children, which was a very interesting domain, something that we don't do often. And the principal investigator, Dr. Anke Klein, she received a grant to do this research. And her idea was if we can help children with getting rid of specific phobia with the help of a digital instrument, then we can make the treatment better and easier and more fun and also cheaper. And she came to us with this idea and asked us to help us, and we liked the idea a lot. It's always good if you can do a project to help people, and especially if you can do it specifically for children. And we thought this is also a very interesting opportunity for us to create an internship. So we created a team actually composed of students, and they did their graduation thesis with us. And we had a lot of fun, and we learned a lot. And also we ran into different things that we didn't run into before. And I would really like to discuss those challenges with you today. First, let's talk a little bit about the domain. For me, it was quite new, so it's always good to be on the same page with that. We're talking about specific phobia, and specific phobia, for instance, are a fear of bugs, fear of heights, fear of spiders. And we shouldn't be confusing this with things like a general anxiety disorder. And a specific phobia is a type of anxiety where you're scared of a bad event. So you think something bad will happen. And usually you want to avoid this bad thing. So if you're afraid of heights, you don't go on top of a skyscraper or walk on a glass bridge. Now, if we can invalidate this fear, so if we can show someone that's anxious about something that is not really something to be scared about, you can invalidate this fear and you can get rid of these phobias. So it's actually the treatment is there, and it's very possible to get rid of it. The only downside is this treatment can cost a lot of time. So it can take a lot of time for the patients themselves, but also for therapists. So lots of sessions with the therapist. Now, there's a specific therapy from the US, from Dr. Ollendick, which is called one-session treatment. And the concept behind this is you go to a therapist once, that's why it's called one-session treatment. You discuss with the therapist how you're going to practice getting rid of this anxiety, and then you go practice yourself. So it's actually something that you have to do yourself to get rid of it. And it works in adults, but we don't know yet if it works well in children. And the whole idea of our project is to create that digital instrument, and that became a mobile app eventually, to test that with children if we can use that to help them practicing with those anxiety exercises. So there will be two groups of children, one that use this app and one that doesn't use this app. And then the experiment has to say whether the app is a good idea and it can actually help. So we developed that app, almost a year, I think, we spent on it. But we ran into different kind of challenges. And the first challenge was that when Dr. Klein came to us with the question, I need a digital instrument to help treat anxiety in children, that idea was very, very vague. We actually didn't know what to do with it. And she didn't know it herself. She had a hard time explaining. So the idea was very abstract, very rough. Second challenge is we're building something for scientific research, and normally you build something for an end user or maybe an API or a data-driven application. But this is specifically for scientific research, and that means that all the methods you use has to be scientifically sound, but also we have to facilitate data collection. So you should be able to get data out of the application to actually do the statistics on it. And the third challenge is always a fun one, is building something specifically for children, and our age group is 7 to 12, and you know maybe that a child of 7 is someone completely different from a child of 12, so that was a challenge in itself. It's not that you have an app for a child. So the abstract idea was just that one line, build me a digital instrument to help with anxiety treatment. And normally we try to write down requirements or maybe user stories, or at least collect something that our application should do and then put it in a backlog and build from there. But we didn't know what to build, so that was really, really hard. So we had to think about ways, how can we deal with this? We did know about the one-session treatment. So one-session treatment is basically you go to a therapist and then you think of exercises that help you treat your phobia. So say, for instance, you are afraid of dogs, then you could say, okay, my first exercise is I look at the picture of a dog. And my second exercise is maybe I go with my neighbor who has a dog when she's walking the dog. And then later on, maybe the dog is even allowed to sit in your lap. And then you go practicing, and these exercises get harder over time, and then you hope to cure your phobia with that. We had that product owner, it was the principal investigator, and of course there's also other researchers in the field, but because the idea was so vague, we couldn't really go to them and ask, what do you think of this? We wanted to show them something, so we needed to think of something that we could bring to the stakeholders, so to the fellow researchers, but even to the children, and then to create some kind of feedback loop that we could use to gather those requirements. The feedback groups were principal investigator, fellow researchers, and the children. And what we did, we thought of two things. We thought, if we start with mock-ups, so basically just digital designs of how we think an app could look, then we can make them really quickly. We can basically make them in one sprint, maybe in 2 weeks, get them out to the stakeholders, gather feedback on the mock-ups, and then we already have some requirements. And then based on those requirements, we can start with a prototype of an application. And then if we can get that application in the hands of the users really quickly or really early in the project, they can just start using it, and they will give us feedback, and then we translate that feedback into requirements, and then we use that in the next sprint. So that's actually what we did. We put the app on a device and just gave the devices to other researchers, to children, to therapists, so they could actually play with it in the beginning in a really rough version already. So not after a couple of sprints, but right as quickly as possible. This is one of the very early designs, and I will show you the actual app later, so you will see that this is completely different. This is actually our first idea. We had a working title. It was called Beat Your Fear, Anxiety and Phobia Project, which was app if you abbreviate it. And the idea of this was it would be an extension of the therapist. So you had this app, and there was a chat function, and you could talk to your therapist, and the therapist would answer. And also, we want to push the children to practice, so we thought we do lots of notifications. So we just kept sending notifications to the children. So there were two types of feedback that came out of this. A therapist said, this is impossible. I cannot be online and chat with all these children. It's just not a feasible solution. It sounds maybe nice on paper, but in practice it's just not doable. And the children said, these notifications just confuse me. It's noise to us. We don't know what to do. We get a pop-up on the phone, we click on it, we go to the app, and then we are lost because there are so many. So we basically had to scrape this whole idea. We just had to throw it in the garbage, start over, and implement completely different mechanisms, which is actually what we did, and I will show you. There's also stuff in the mockups that's still there. That was also where we were right. So there's exercises, there's a thermometer to measure anxiety, which is actually apparently a validated instrument. So everything you want to do and ask and measure, you cannot just pick the best interaction style or go to a UX book, but you actually have to think, okay, I need an instrument that is validated, so you need to look up a paper and see that you can use that actually with your age group. There's also a media gallery, and children can take pictures. And we had something called a profile page where we showed points, but also goals and medals, and there was a store, and basically all the rest that didn't fit in the other pages we put on this page. And when we showed this to the children, they said, I don't know what this is. I don't know what the information is I'm looking for. So we had to split this up into all different pages, which was also very good feedback. So purely from the mock-ups, we already gathered an extreme amount of information that guided the direction for a first version of our application. So when we were able to write down those requirements and build a prototype, we could actually install this prototype on a device and get the device in the hands of children. So we had a child panel, which became part of our development. Those were 33 children, and they were constantly using the apps. They could give feedback whenever they wanted, and we used that feedback as input for our backlog. But we also had more formal sessions with them. So next to just the feedback they could give, we had sessions with them. For instance, this video is about discussing the mock-up. So we went through the mock-ups with them and then collected the feedback from them. But they also got homework. We said, which apps do you like and which apps can we use, or which functionalities can we use in our applications that you like and that would work for you. We discussed the design and the look and feel, also something that changed. We had a session about how do we reward the children, so how much points can you collect, what can you do with these points if you buy something from the virtual store, what does it cost. And then we did app testing on a almost final version, and in the end, so after the clinical trial, there also will be a project evaluation session. So now we had these 33 children becoming part of our development, and they were really enthusiastic. So they offered ideas, maybe you can do this, and then sometimes we had a new version and their idea didn't end up in that version, and they were really disappointed. So they really owned this process, but it also meant that they were not independent anymore. They really wanted to see their own ideas back in the app. So we lost the fresh mind of the children for pure feedback. So we created another group of children, which we called a pilot group. 25 children in total, 15 children played with the app for an hour, and then another group of 10 children played with the app for a week. And a new feedback came out of this, because they were not owning the process, they were completely fresh, and they didn't have any bias because they wanted to see their own ideas, which worked really well for us. And the children actually really liked the app. I heard that they were using it for household chores. So if they had to do the dishes, and they could get a reward from their parents. The parents didn't like it that much because they had to hand out rewards all the time, but the children liked it a lot. Okay, so after all the feedback sessions, this is actually what the app looks now. The name is KibA, so it's not a Beat Your Fear app anymore. In English, it stands for Kids Beats Anxiety, but the app is also being used in the Netherlands and Germany, and it works in all 3 languages. So we're very happy with that. We have an abbreviation or a name that can go in three languages. It has become an implementation of the one-session treatment. So it contains exposure exercises, and we can use this to validate the app condition. So app condition is the children that use the app during one-session treatment, and they will be compared to the children that don't use that app. Okay, so this is a little video of an exercise. So there's a description of an exercise. You choose which level you want to do the exercise on. We try to measure anxiety, and we ask questions. Are you able to complete the exercise? Do you think something will happen during the exercise that scares you? And if it happens, are you able to handle this? And then we have a description of the exercise, and they actually start doing the exercise, and then they are invited to make pictures and videos during, because after they've done the exercise, they can actually look at those pictures. So if you're scared of spiders, you have one on your hand, you take a picture of it, and then later on you can see the picture, I was able to let the spider walk on my hand, and that apparently works well. And then, of course, after the exercise, you also ask questions about the anxiety levels and whether they reach the goals, and if something happened, do they think it will happen again the next time? And all of those questions, when I had to implement them, I was like, oh, this is tedious, all these questions, why are you asking these children all these questions? But it's actually, for the researchers, very important that they are asked, because they facilitate the data collection, which was our second challenge. We're building something for scientific research, so the production context for us is not something that ends up in an app store only for the users. The production context for us is it is going to be used in a scientific experiment. So we have to facilitate that data collection, and we have to implement the correct scientific paradigms. So we also had to be aware of the research questions. The research questions were, how can we actually develop an app which kids like, so they keep using it and they keep practicing? Does the app help to actually reduce the anxiety? And if it works, why does this exposure therapy work? And the researchers are trying to answer the questions by doing the clinical trial with our app. So how can we make something for specific children that they want to keep using? Well, it turns out that threat beliefs, if you have a phobia, they are really specific to the individual. So if I'm scared of children, of spiders, maybe of children as well. If I'm scared of spiders and you are scared of spiders, there's a difference between our phobia. We cannot generalize this. So we cannot say we create exercises for spider phobia, fear of heights, flights, children. But the children have to come up with the exercises themselves. So within a session, with the therapist, they brainstorm about these exercises. And apparently it's also powerful because they own the process, so they can challenge themselves. They can think, okay, what am I afraid of, what am I not afraid of, and how do I go from the thing that I'm able to do to the thing that I want to do. Of course, it's more work. It's more work for the child, it's more work for development. If you download the app from the App Store, it would be completely empty, so you're building a shell, which is always more work than building a specific thing. Now, when they do these exercises, they can collect points, and depending on which difficulty level they do, they get different kind of points. They can also reach certain goals, like do a certain amount of exercises, or make video, make a photo, and they get extra points. And then these coins are converted into credits, and the credits can then be spent in a store. And our first idea was to make a digital store with digital items, but that becomes boring really fast if your digital item is not really of value. So if you have a game, you can say maybe if you get some kind of outfit and other people can see how you look, that has some value, right? Because you achieved something and now people say, you have that special outfit. But in our application, we didn't have anything like that. The digital items were not of value. So we actually thought maybe we should use physical rewards, and they can just buy these physical rewards in our app. So together with the parents, they say, okay, if I do a couple of exercises and I get 10 points, I get a sticker, or I get a cookie. Or if you don't want to reward with candy, which is a valid point, you can say, maybe I want to play a board game with my dad, or maybe I'm allowed to choose what we eat for dinner. So those rewards are also individual and are also physical. The second research question was, does the app actually work? Now, this comes back in the questions we ask during, before the exercise and after the exercise. So we ask, how do we feel before the exercise, and we ask, how do you feel after the exercise? And of course, we expect, or the researchers expect, a decline in that value. And a third a question they try to answer is, why does exposure therapy actually work? And there's two theories. One is expectancy violation. And this basically means that you think something bad will happen, but it doesn't happen. Because a lot of these fears that are treatable, they are not really realistic, right? You can be afraid of dogs if maybe you live near wild dogs. But in general, a dog shouldn't be of any danger. So if you have fear of dogs, that's not really a rational anxiety. So if you pet a dog and it doesn't bite you, you can say, next time I pet a dog, it won't bite me. So this fear is irrational, I shouldn't be afraid. So that's something that we try to collect by asking, do you think something negative will happen during the exercise? And then after the exercise, we ask, do you think it will happen the next time? Second theory is habituation. And that basically means getting used to the thing you do. So for instance, speaking on stage is kind of scary. But if you do it more often, it gets better, right? The people don't laugh at you in general, and they listen, stay, they don't walk out of the room. And you get used to it. So it becomes less scary, and that's habituation. And basically that's just by measuring what the anxiety level is right after the exercise, but also during the exercise. So if you do the exercise, you expect that the anxiety level rises, but then after the exercise, it should decline because you completed the exercise, you should be more happy that you completed the exercise, and you should be less anxious. But it's all theory, it's all something that has to be the result of the trial. Now, we do also a lot of data collection in the backend, and the researchers can log into a backend and they can download these events. It's completely anonymous. So we only have participants ID, we don't have any names, we don't have any IP addresses, so that was also a thing that we had to take into account. We can not just collect this data on children and put names and addresses there as well. So, our final challenge was that we were building something for a specific age group, and the age group is children between 7 and 12. And we asked them which features from existing apps and games they liked, because we wanted to make something that was suitable for all ranges. And well, I have children, and my oldest is 12, and she's completely different from her sister, who's like 9, and so that's even closer together. So they just like different things, and 12 is almost like an adolescent, and you like more adult things, and 7 is really a kid, so you like these kids things. But one thing everybody likes, and even I like it, is Mario Odyssey on Switch. Mario Odyssey on Switch, I think, is a very good example of something that's applicable to maybe 6 and up, or even 4 and up. And the concept that they told us that they liked is, if you do a task, you collect a power moon. So in some way they get a reward for doing this task. Some things are just, you have to look for the power moon, but there's also like time challenges, so you have to do something in a certain time, and if you reach that task, you collect this power moon. And they like this a lot. But why do they like this? Why do these goals, these power moons, and in our application these goals, why do they work? So we had to dive into the literature for this, and it turns out there was a study done by Hamari, 2017, and the paper is called Do Badges Increase User Activity? And apparently they work, and lots of games use them, but they work for a whole different range of reasons. So, and actually a lot of those things we implemented in the app as well. So, first reason is they anchor our performance expectation higher, and that is something, if you start our app and you have to collect points, then what number is a challenging number? You don't know how many points you get. So if you create a goal, and the goal is earn 50 points, then the user gets a mark, and they say, oh, the goal is 50 points, so probably it's kind of a challenge to reach those 50 points. So now they have the mark which amount of points they should be able to get to, and that's why they want to get to that amount of points. And having those explicit numbers also can increase our self-efficacy, because they know the app is used by multiple children. So they think, if someone else can reach that goal of 50 points, then surely I must be able to do this as well. So that also helps them motivating to get to those 50 points. And then when you reach that goal, when you get to that 50 points, it really feels good. And people tend to like things that feel good, so they want to repeat that feeling. So that boost in self-efficacy, they want to feel that again. So they want to do another goal, and they want to do another goal. And they also create goal commitment. It's better to be really specific than generic. If you say, do exercises, it becomes vague really, really quickly. Someone does exercise, and that's it. But if you say, do 10 exercises, that becomes an explicit thing that you can chase. Also where we use it is, and this is something you see in lots of games as well, we use it as a guidance, or as a kind of a tutorial. For instance, we want to teach the children that during an exercise they can make photos and videos. So we created a goal out of this. We said, if you create 3 videos and you watch them back later, you also reach a goal and you get more points. And you can use all these goals in the beginning especially to guide the user through your application. Something that extends or builds on that is you want the user to get into some kind of psychological flow, and that's a sweet spot between effort and reward. And these specific instructions can help you keep the user there. So if you give the right feedback, so when they're doing the tasks and you reward them, you can actually keep them in that flow. So for instance, our exercises can be done on different difficulty levels. And some children always do it on the easiest one, because they think, if I do the easiest one, then I'm just done with it. Then after a couple of tries, we say, maybe you should try silver instead of bronze. And there's also a goal for this, so collect silver medals instead of bronze medals. And that's the way we try to challenge them to do the exercises on a higher level. You can also use them to show off to your parents and your siblings. You can say, look at all these goals I had. So there's also a reason for some children to do them. And finally, something that we didn't implement in our app because we didn't want to basically make it a social app. But you could think of something like a leaderboard. So we could, for instance, do a leaderboard in our applications and then just put the points there, and then children have to or can go up that ladder. But we didn't want to do any sharing of data, and it's also, of course, a little bit of a privacy thing where the app is really used for the child himself, so we omitted it. But it's one of the things that you can do with goals as well. Okay, so as an overview of how this motivational model works is we have medals. They are a direct reward for the exercises on 3 levels, bronze, silver, gold. Then you can collect points based on those medals, but also based on coins, on goals. And those points are converted into credits we can be spent. And then the goals we use for motivation, feedback, and as a tutorial. One of the other apps that came out of the homework was Duolingo, which is very well known, and it's also well known for the goals aspect. But what we got as feedback actually was the children like the owl avatar. So Duolingo has that very irritating owl which pops up now and then, or at least I find him irritating. But the children said, yeah, we really liked it because it's as if he helps you during the exercises. And it makes it far more personal. And if you remember in the beginning of the talk, I said this app is could be an extension of the therapist. The ID we scraped because it was not feasible. But if it's an extension of the therapist, it's really personal because you can talk to someone and you get an answer back. And we scraped that ID, and then the app became impersonal. So we added this little hair, this drawn hair, which is now kind of the avatar of our application, and the children liked it because it's like he speaks to you. He explains how an exercise works, but he also rewards you. So when you're done with your exercise, then he pops up and he says, here's your medal, you've done well. And we also use him in pop-ups. So it's something that the children find really attractive. Then the third app that came up is a Gruffalo app, and if you have kids, you might know this app, but it contains games. And the games can be done on the different difficulty levels. And the games are essentially the same. So if you choose easy, or if you choose hard, you get a different level of the game, but the game is exactly the same. So for instance, one is a maze, and on the easy, the maze is really simple, and on the hard, the maze is really big. And apparently, it's important if you do exposure exercises that you own your own process. You shouldn't be pushed to do something that you don't want to do. So it should become from yourself that you do a more difficult exercise. So this model of doing the same exercise on a different difficulty level helps the children when they create the exercises. It also reduces the amount of exercises they have to create. There's 10 exercises in the app, and if you have 3 difficulty levels, you have 30 exercises, which is a really big amount if you only have one session to come up with 30 exercises. But if you just say, an exercise is looking at the picture for 5 seconds on easy, 30 seconds on medium, and 60 seconds on hard, you only have to think of one exercise, and you just increase the difficulty level, but it stays the same exercise. So if you are afraid and you have to do that exercise, then you can also say the easy one is only 5 seconds. Just do it for 5 seconds. And then if you have done it for 5 seconds, well, if I can do 5 seconds, 30 seconds is not that hard, right? So this becomes a gradual exposure for them within the exercise, which actually very simple idea, which lots of apps use, but apparently this works and it fits in the scientific background as well. Now, one of the other things we got from the children was actually something that we completely overlooked. What happens when you fail an exercise? Nobody thought of it until one child said, this to us and asked us this question: what happens when we fail an exercise? And we thought, yes, we have to do something with this, because if they fail an exercise and you don't properly handle this, you get something we call failure avoidance. They don't want to use the app anymore. They don't want to do the exercises anymore. So we have to handle this in a specific way. So you can fail an exercise basically in two ways. You can basically don't reach your goal. So we ask them, did you reach your goal? But you can also experience a higher anxiety after the exercise than before the exercise. And what we came up with is something we called a hero card. So if you fail an exercise, you indicate that you didn't reach your goal or that you have a higher anxiety. We say, okay, great try, it's not that bad. If you do the same exercise again today, we reward you with a card. And you get that card whether the second time you reach your goal or not. So we try to reward the effort here and not the result. You always get a card and you get a little card indication next to your exercise, even though you didn't reach it. And we hope that this is something that helps continuing exercises even if you fail the exercise. Okay, so what's the current state? We built two apps, an Android one and an iOS one. It's in the both store, so we got through the reviews as well. You can download it, but you cannot log in. You can only get a login if you have a therapist, so it's a closed group at the moment. App is available in English, Dutch, and German. Those three languages will also be used during the clinical trial. And they're roughly halfway. So the clinical trial started. They have done about 70 children. In total, they will do 150, 75 without the application, and 75 with the application. And of course, they hope that the ones with the app are more motivated to do their exercises and to complete it. And what did it mean for us? Well, our team of students said this is one of the nicest things we have ever done in terms of how we did the project, because we really pushed out new features and gave them to the user or to the children, and we got feedback immediately. And they were also really honest, so it was also really nice to get that feedback. So we could do a lot of experimentation, we could fail, we could think of things that just didn't work and we have to scrape. The stakeholders, so the other researchers, liked it as well. They also liked that they got mock-ups really early in the process and that they could actually they had this idea for a while, and they had to write the grant for it, and then the grant was awarded, and of course this takes a lot of time. And now, finally, after all that time, they could actually hold something in their hands and say, this is what we're going to make, or this is not what we're going to make, but I like this idea and I want this changed. And the product owner liked this as well, because she also didn't know what she wanted to build, and now she knows what she wanted to build, because she has it. And every time we show this app to someone, and especially the therapist, they say, I want this app. How can I join? I want to download it. I'm afraid of heights, and I want to use this to practice myself. And the children have the same feeling as well. If you want to know more, there's a couple of resources I put on the slides. I think the middle one is it's a podcast, so it's for me the nicest one to consume. We had a little interview in the Trifork podcast about this app. We also have the case study in the Trifork website, but also the grant provider has done an article about it. And that's me.